Alpha Squadron has gone dark. Chaos erupted in the control center. No one dared take off, except one person. A woman with neatly tied hair, not yet 40, stepped into the cockpit. She entered a security code that no one thought she knew. The F-15 roared to life. She was the last one left. Who was she? Why had she lived like a shadow for 8 years? Her name was Avery Knox, 38 years old, a maintenance technician at the Utah Air Force Base. Slender build, brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, always wearing silver coveralls. She wore noise-canceling headphones constantly and avoided crowded areas. Her hands were small but calloused from years of wrench work. Official title, Basic Maintenance Engineer. She specialized in radar system checks, aircraft fuel loading, and HUD screen calibration. Tasks that kept her close to the machines, but invisible to the people. She never joined the coffee break conversations. She stayed away from the group of male officers who loved to show off their flight stories at the mess hall. When they talked about G-forces and barrel rolls, she would quietly slip away. The young pilot squad called her Ghost Tech because she appeared silently to fix problems, then vanished before anyone could thank her properly. Some thought she was antisocial. Others assumed she was intimidated by the testosterone-heavy environment. They were all wrong. At lunch, she ate alone in the corner of the cafeteria, reading old flight manuals and technical specifications. Once, a young pilot named Marcus strutted over with his buddies and made a comment. "Hey, Ghost Tech, planning to fly planes from memory? Maybe you should stick to oil changes." She just smiled softly, closed her manual, and walked away. No reaction, no argument. The truth was buried in classified files that only 3 people had ever read. She had been the youngest fighter pilot to control an F-16 at age 25. Her first year in combat, she had shot down 2 enemy aircraft and completed 17 high-risk missions without a scratch. But during her 18th mission, a navigation error led her squadron into an ambush. Her wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, was shot down while covering Avery's retreat. Sarah died in the wreckage before rescue could arrive. After the funeral, Avery voluntarily requested transfer to logistics and buried her entire combat record. She made the Pentagon promise to classify her service history. No one would know that Viper Hawk had ever existed. 8 years had passed. 8 years of hiding behind maintenance logs and fuel gauges. 8 years of watching cocky young pilots make basic mistakes she had mastered a decade ago. 8 years of biting her tongue when she saw dangerous flying techniques. Every morning she arrived at 0500 hours sharp. Every evening she left at exactly 1800 hours. Same routine, same silence, same invisible existence. The base commander barely knew her name. The flight instructors treated her like part of the equipment. The mechanics respected her technical skills but never asked personal questions. She preferred it that way. Guilt was easier to carry in silence. In her small apartment off base, she kept one photo hidden in a drawer. 5 pilots in flight suits, arms crossed, standing in front of an F-16 with Viper Squadron painted on the nose. She was in the center, the only woman, the youngest face, wearing captain's bars. 4 of those pilots were dead now. She was the only survivor of Viper Squadron. Alpha Squadron was attacked during an arms trafficking interdiction mission near the Canadian border. Intelligence had tracked a weapons convoy moving through mountain passes, but it was a trap. Radio contact was lost in just 7 minutes. The last transmission was Pilot Jackson screaming about surface-to-air missiles and requesting immediate backup. The control center became a storm of panic and shouting voices. The commander, Colonel Hayes, shouted across the room, "Where's our backup squad? Who's ready for immediate deployment?" Lieutenant Morrison checked the flight roster and shook his head grimly. "Sir, Bravo Squadron is deployed in Afghanistan. Charlie Squadron is in maintenance rotation. Delta Squadron won't be mission ready for 6 hours." 6 hours? Hayes slammed his fist on the desk. "Those pilots will be dead or captured in 6 hours. No one has enough time to prep for a combat mission, sir. The fastest we could scramble anyone would be 4 hours minimum. There's nobody left who can fly right now." The control center sank into desperate silence. 2 pilots were missing, possibly down, definitely in enemy territory. Every second counted, and they had no options. Avery was sitting at her usual spot in the back corner of the room, monitoring system diagnostics on her laptop. She had been tracking the Alpha Squadron mission through routine maintenance protocols, making sure their aircraft systems stayed green during the operation. When the crisis hit, she quietly closed her laptop and stood up. Without a word, she walked straight toward the hangar bay where an F-15 Strike Eagle sat in partial maintenance status. Senior Airman Rodriguez noticed her first. "Hey, Knox, where are you going? That bird's not cleared for flight." Avery ignored him and continued walking. She approached the aircraft's access panel and began entering a security code sequence. Master Sergeant Williams ran over, shouting, "Stop right there! You don't have clearance for that aircraft? That's a restricted access fighter." Avery didn't respond. Her fingers moved quickly across the keypad, entering a 20-digit code that should have been impossible for a maintenance technician to know. The access panel beeped twice and turned green. The cockpit began its startup sequence. Everyone in the hangar froze. A mechanic dropped his wrench. Two ground crew members stopped what they were doing and stared. An old, raspy voice came from behind them. It was Chief Master Sergeant Kowalski, a 30-year veteran who had seen everything the Air Force had to offer. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Only Level 1 combat pilots have that code. Only pilots with Alpha-level security clearance." Avery was already climbing into the cockpit, moving with practiced efficiency. She adjusted the seat, checked the HUD displays, and began the pre-flight sequence from memory. Her voice came through the intercom system, calm and professional. "Control tower, this is Maintenance Technician Knox requesting immediate emergency authorization for combat sortie." Colonel Hayes grabbed the radio microphone. "Knox, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're not qualified for combat operations?" Avery's voice was steady, cold, and completely confident. "Sir, Alpha Squadron has 3 minutes before their position becomes unrecoverable. I have the aircraft, I have the weapons, and I have the training. Permission to engage." "Knox, I don't know what kind of training you think you have, but Viper Squadron, 2016 to 2017. 17 combat missions, 2 confirmed kills, 0 losses until..." Her voice caught slightly. "Until Mission 18. My call sign was Viper Hawk." The control room fell absolutely silent. Every person in that room knew about Viper Squadron. They were legends. They were also supposedly all dead. Chief Kowalski whispered into his headset, "Holy shit, Hayes. She's telling the truth. Viper Hawk was real." Colonel Hayes stared at the radio for 10 seconds that felt like an hour. Finally, his voice crackled through the speakers. "Viper Hawk, you are cleared for immediate combat operations. God help us all." Avery's F-15. Strike Eagle roared down the runway with afterburners blazing. She pulled back on the stick and climbed at a 70-degree angle, reaching 15,000 feet in less than 2 minutes. For the first time in 8 years, she felt complete. Her hands moved across the controls with muscle memory that 8 years of hiding couldn't erase. Radar systems, weapons targeting, navigation computers, everything responded to her touch like she had never stopped flying. She activated her advanced radar evasion protocols, flying a route she designed in real time to avoid enemy detection. The mountainous terrain below looked like a 3-dimensional chessboard, and she was thinking 5 moves ahead. She flew close to the canyon walls, using the landscape to mask her heat signature. Her HUD displayed terrain-following radar that kept her 50 feet above the rocks at 400 miles per hour. The radio crackled with intercepted enemy communications. Russian accented English mixed with local dialect. They were coordinating a search for the downed American pilots. "American aircraft confirmed destroyed. Pilots ejected. Beginning ground search in Sector 7. Avery's jaw tightened. Her people were alive, but not for long. She switched to encrypted military frequency and contacted the control center. "Control, this is Viper Hawk. I'm tracking multiple hostile vehicles at coordinates 42.7128 north, 114.0407 west. I count 6 trucks, 2 armored personnel carriers, and what looks like a mobile SAM site. Alpha Squadron survivors are somewhere in this area. Viper Hawk, can you confirm pilot status?" Negative visual on pilots yet, but enemy ground chatter suggests active search operations. "They're looking for our people. which means our people are still alive. Avery banked hard around a mountain peak and suddenly saw the enemy convoy below. 6 military trucks loaded with armed men racing through a narrow canyon road toward the crash site. She didn't rush to attack. This required precision, not firepower. She climbed to 8,000 feet and activated her targeting computer. The enemy vehicles were moving in formation, but they had made a tactical error. They were bunched together in the canyon with no room to maneuver. First target, the lead vehicle, probably carrying the unit commander and communications equipment. Avery rolled inverted and dove at an 80-degree angle, building speed until her aircraft was screaming through the air like a guided missile. At 2,000 feet, she squeezed the trigger. The M61 Vulcan cannon fired 100 rounds in 2 seconds. 20-millimeter shells tore through the lead truck's engine block and cabin. The vehicle exploded in a ball of orange flame. The convoy scattered in panic, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow canyon. Avery pulled out of her dive and climbed for another attack run. Her radio crackled with panicked enemy voices. "We're under attack. American fighter aircraft. Request immediate air support. No air support available. Take cover." Second target, the mobile SAM launcher. That thing could shoot her down if she gave it a chance. She approached from a different angle, using the sun's glare to mask her approach. The SAM operator was desperately trying to acquire a lock, but Avery was flying too low and too fast. She released 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles from 3,000 feet. Both missiles found their target. The SAM launcher disappeared in a massive explosion that echoed through the canyon like thunder. Now she could operate freely. Avery established a combat air patrol pattern over the area, searching for her missing pilots. Her thermal imaging system scanned the rocky terrain below. There, 2 heat signatures hiding behind a cluster of boulders, about half a mile from the main road. She switched to the emergency rescue frequency. "Any American personnel on emergency channel? This is Viper Hawk. If you can hear this transmission, signal your position." A weak voice responded, "Viper Hawk, this is Alpha 2. We're alive but injured. Jackson has a broken leg. We're hiding in the rocks about 500 meters east of the burning vehicles." "Copy that, Alpha 2. Stay hidden. I'm calling in extraction now." Avery contacted the control center. "Control, I have visual confirmation on both Alpha Squadron survivors. They're alive but need immediate medical evacuation. I'm maintaining air cover until rescue arrives." 20 minutes later, a rescue helicopter appeared on the horizon. Both pilots were extracted safely. When Avery's F-15 touched down at Utah Air Force Base, half the personnel on duty were waiting on the tarmac. Word had spread quickly. Ghost Tech was actually a combat legend. She taxied to her parking spot, shut down the engines, and popped the canopy. As she climbed down from the cockpit, her legs were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but her face remained calm. Colonel Hayes approached with a crowd of officers behind him. "Knox, that was some of the finest flying I've ever witnessed. We owe you a debt we can never repay." "Just doing my job, sir." "Like hell you were. You saved 2 lives and completed a mission that should have required an entire squadron." He paused, studying her face. "I'm recommending you for immediate reinstatement to active combat duty. The Air Force needs pilots like you." Avery shook her head quietly. "With respect, sir, I'd prefer to return to maintenance." "Knox, you can't be serious. You're one of the best combat pilots this country has ever produced. Why would you want to stay in the shadows?" She looked toward the hangar where her maintenance tools were waiting. "Because, sir, sometimes the best way to serve is to be ready when nobody expects it." The crowd dispersed slowly, but the change was immediate and permanent. When Avery walked through the base now, conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. Young pilots began asking her technical questions about aircraft systems. Maintenance crews sought her advice on complex problems they had never encountered. Marcus, the young pilot who had mocked her weeks earlier, approached her during lunch the next day. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I had no idea who you were." "You still don't," Avery replied calmly. "I'm the same person I was yesterday. I just had a different day at work. Would you be willing to teach me some things? About flying, I mean, real flying." Avery studied his face. He was young, eager, and completely unprepared for what real combat flying demanded, just like she had been at his age. Show up at 0500 tomorrow. We'll start with systems checks and basic aerodynamics. If you can handle that for a month without complaining, maybe we'll talk about advanced maneuvers. Yes, ma'am, thank you. A week later, the base commander placed a worn flight helmet outside her quarters. It was the exact type she had used in Viper Squadron, with her original call sign painted on the side, Viper Hawk. A handwritten note was attached, "We owe you, and we're still learning from you, even though you never need to say a word. The sky is lucky to have you back." Avery kept the helmet, but she never wore it. Some symbols are more powerful when they remain retired. The world sometimes doesn't believe women can soar with the storm winds. But the sky doesn't choose gender, rank, or recognition. It only keeps those who never surrender their wings. Avery had never stopped being a pilot. She just waited for the right moment to fly again. And when no one else dared take off, she was the last one ready to soar. True honor doesn't need announcements or ceremonies. It only needs to be preserved, protected, and revealed when it matters most. Some legends hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the world needs them most. Avery Knox was always ready to fly.